Let me first show you a scene. I'm reclining in a throne-like genuine leather office chair, while Lydia, the once arrogant socialite, is kneeling at my feet, sobbing uncontrollably, her makeup smeared until she looks like a cheap clown. Meanwhile, Irene, Wall Street's most elite socialite, is straddling my lap, kissing my earlobe with lips painted a vivid red and whispering in an incredibly seductive voice, "Master, the entire $100 billion fortune of the Kane family has been wiped out. How would you like us to deal with this bunch of trash? Doesn't that sound incredibly satisfying?" Absolutely. But just 72 hours ago, the script was written completely differently. Back then, I was Ethan Vale, the notorious dead-broke scholarship student at Sterling Academy. On the East Coast in November, the torrential rain fell as if it were washing the city's sins away. On the open-air plaza of Sterling Academy, the cold wind lashed my face like knives, but I couldn't feel the cold, because my girlfriend of 6 months, Lydia Hayes, had just thrown a large cup of Starbucks iced Americano straight into my face in front of hundreds of wealthy students watching the spectacle from beneath the colonnade. The ice slid down the collar of my 20 yuan discount white t-shirt, and the dark brown coffee stain spread across my chest, looking exactly like an absurd joke. "Ethan, you're pathetic. Poverty-stricken appearance makes me sick to my stomach." Lydia hurled the empty paper cup at my chest. The face I had once thought pure and sweet was now filled with undisguised contempt and disgust. "You think working 3 jobs and spending 1,000 yuan on that lousy necklace can impress me? Dream on. You don't even deserve to order me a bottle of wine at an upscale restaurant." A burst of ear-piercing laughter erupted around us. At this business school, where 90% of the students were descendants of the rich and powerful, a scholarship student like me who had clawed his way up from the bottom was always their favorite source of amusement. The crowd automatically parted, as though clearing a path for a tyrant inspecting his territory. Victor Kane, the most notorious bully at the school, swaggered toward us. The Kane family controlled half the city's real estate and ports, making them the true local power brokers. Victor was dressed in a custom-tailored suit worth 60,000 yuan, with 2 bodyguards like door gods following behind him. He walked over to Lydia and naturally put an arm around her slender waist, then gave her cheek a loud kiss. Not only did Lydia not resist, she nestled obediently against his chest like a female cat in heat. "Hey, poor loser." Victor looked down at me condescendingly, deliberately raising his left hand to flaunt the limited edition Richard Mille watch worth 3 million yuan on his wrist. "Don't look at me with those pathetic eyes. This is the power of capital. Understand? Trash like you, who's only fit to pick coins out of sewers, isn't even worthy of carrying her shoes. Lydia is my woman now. If you know what's good for you, crawl back to your slum." If I had been an ordinary poor kid, I probably would have fallen apart right then. Either I would have knelt on the ground like a dog, begging that gold digger to stay, or charged at Victor's bodyguards for the sake of my pitiful dignity, only to have a few ribs broken and be thrown into a trash can. But I didn't. I stood silently in the torrential rain, allowing the icy water to wash the coffee from my face. I felt no anger, no sorrow, not even the slightest emotional stir. I looked at the adulterous pair before me as though they were 2 corpses about to be fed into a meat grinder. At that very moment, an extremely mechanical and frigid voice rang out from the depths of my mind. The system announced, "The Empire-devouring system has been activated. The identity seal has been completely lifted. Host Ethan Vale, welcome back to your throne. The countdown to the hunt has officially begun." I wiped the water from my face, and the corners of my mouth slowly stretched into a bone-chilling smile. Lydia saw my smile and shuddered involuntarily, shrinking into Victor's arms. "Victor, is he crazy?" "Of course he's crazy. After all, poor people aren't exactly known for their brains." Victor let out a mocking laugh, pulled a $100 bill from his pocket, crumpled it into a ball, and tossed it into the puddle at my feet like a bone. "Take it, Ethan. Buy yourself some dry clothes, and don't get the school floor dirty." "Victor," I finally spoke, my voice seeming unusually calm amid the thunderstorm, yet carrying a chill that froze the marrow in one's bones. "I hope you remember this glorious moment, because soon, you'll repay this cup of coffee with every inch of the Kane family's land and every penny of its wealth." With that, I ignored Victor's look of contempt, as though I were an idiot, and paid no attention to the deafening laughter all around me. I stepped on the $100 bill floating in the muddy water, turned around, and walked into the endless downpour. "Laugh as much as you like, idiots. You think you've crushed the self-esteem of some poor kid? No. You've just awakened a devil capable of making all of Wall Street tremble. The real show is only just beginning." I walked toward the academy gates at an unhurried pace, cold rain dripping from the tips of my hair. Behind me, in the corridor, Victor and his gang were still laughing loudly at me like a pack of rutting baboons. In their eyes, I was a beaten stray dog, utterly broken and running away with my tail between my legs. But honestly, I feel fantastic right now. It's like playing a game that's frustrated you for ages, only to finally unlock infinite ammo and God mode. Just as I reached the academy's magnificent wrought iron gates, a deep, resonant engine roar suddenly tore through the curtain of rain. It wasn't the hysterical shriek of a Ferrari, but the low growl of a true steel behemoth, carrying an unmistakable sense of absolute, overwhelming oppression. All the laughter was instantly cut off, as if severed by a single stroke. The hundreds of wealthy heirs gathered beneath the corridor, including Victor and Lydia, all turned their heads in unison and stared fixedly at the entrance, like a flock of turkeys caught by the throat. A custom-built, stretched Rolls-Royce Phantom measuring over 7 meters in length came to a perfectly smooth stop at the academy entrance, ghost-like in its silence. But what truly made these rich second-generation heirs, who prided themselves on having seen it all, gasp was the car's color. Pure gold. Not the cheap gold-colored vinyl wrap favored by nouveau riche, but genuine custom automotive paint made with a high concentration of real gold, washed by the rain. This industrial marvel, costing at least 50 million, radiated a breathtakingly luxurious sheen. The 3 million yuan Richard Mille on Victor's wrist looked like a plastic toy next to it. Oh my God! Is a member of some country's royal family here? Someone in the crowd swallowed and muttered under their breath. Victor also unconsciously straightened up, pushed Lydia away from his arms, and adjusted his bespoke suit. In this world where capital reigned supreme, anyone who could afford a vehicle of this caliber, even his arrogant real estate mogul father, would have to scramble over and lick the soles of its owner's shoes like a lapdog. Amid the deathly silence that had fallen over the entire scene, the rear door of the Rolls-Royce slowly opened. A pair of immaculately polished Oxford shoes stepped into a puddle. An old man in an exquisitely tailored tailcoat emerged. His hair was gray, but his back was ramrod straight, and his gaze was as sharp as an eagle's. If any of Wall Street's top tycoons had been present, they would have been so terrified that they wet themselves on the spot, because this old man was none other than Sebastian Cross, the living fossil rumored to control countless clandestine global money flows. In financial circles, people called him God's steward. Sebastian opened a pure black carbon fiber umbrella. Instead of walking toward Victor, who was struggling to force a fawning smile, he turned around, splashed through the muddy water, and walked straight toward me, soaked from head to toe, with a large coffee stain still emblazoned across my chest. What happened next was a scene that the rich second-generation students of Sterling Academy would remember for the rest of their lives. This legendary butler, who could make Wall Street tremble merely by stamping his foot, stopped one step away from me. Then, completely disregarding the mud on the ground, he knelt down on one knee without hesitation. Young master. Sebastian's voice was not loud, yet it echoed clearly across the silent square. The 3-year period of experiencing life at the bottom, arranged by the family for you, has come to a successful end. The old master sent me to bring you home. You've suffered enough. Silence. A deathly silence. I could even hear Lydia suck in a breath from sheer shock. Her eyes, framed by exquisitely applied eyeliner, were wide as bells, and her jaw had nearly hit her feet. Victor looked as if he had been struck by lightning. His face instantly went deathly pale, his lips trembling violently, unable to utter even a complete sentence. The poor wretch they had been grinding beneath their feet was actually the heir to a top-tier tycoon family? I paid no attention to that group of human statues who had already been petrified. In my mind, the cold voice of the system rang out once again. Identity verification complete. The initial capital of the 10 trillion empire has been fully unlocked. You may now impose economic sanctions on any target at any time. That's more like it. I took the $1 million, entirely handmade cashmere coat Sebastian held out to me and casually draped it over my shoulders. Just as I was about to get into the car, I stopped and glanced back at Lydia and Victor, who stood there dumbfounded. I didn't lose my temper or shout. I simply gave them an utterly casual yet bone-chillingly cold smile. That smile conveyed one clear message. Your time to die has come. Then I got into the solid gold Rolls-Royce. The moment the door closed, it shut out the terrified, despairing expressions of those fools completely. Back to the manor. Sebastian, reclining in the soft calfskin seat, I poured myself a glass of fine whiskey from 70 years ago. Also, pull up the Kane family's complete asset statements. I want to make sure they don't live to see next month. The solid gold Rolls-Royce glided smoothly through the torrential rain into my 200-acre private estate, like a ferocious beast with its fill of food and drink. The gates slowly closed, shutting out all the noise, and the shock of that pack of idiots, completely. Holding a glass of top-shelf whiskey aged for 70 years, I stood before the floor-to-ceiling window of the study on the estate's top floor, looking down over the city trembling beneath the thunderstorm. Victor must have thought I would immediately call upon the family's power and, first thing tomorrow morning, uproot the Kane family as easily as crushing a bug. If I really did that, it would be far too boring. Young master. Sebastian appeared silently behind me, holding a thick file containing every last bit of the Kane family's dirty laundry. As you instructed, I've prepared a comprehensive plan to bring down Kane Group. The moment you give the word, 80% of their market value will evaporate when the Nasdaq opens tomorrow, before noon. Victor's father will be taken away by the FBI for defaulting on his massive debts. I know the old man's methods all too well. Decisive, clean, one-shot lethal. But I shook my head, turned around, and downed the whiskey in my glass. No, Sebastian. Simply crushing them to death would be letting them off too easily. I walked over to the enormous mahogany desk and powered on a specially designed supercomputer. If the prey doesn't even have a chance to struggle, what's the fun in hunting? I want them to watch their empire crumble bit by bit in despair. I want them to experience true fear. It was like cutting flesh with a dull knife. Only by bleeding them slowly could you hear the most agonizing screams. Understood, young master. Then what is your plan? Sebastian inclined his head slightly. His deeply wrinkled face remained utterly impassive, as though we were merely discussing what to have for breakfast tomorrow. I didn't answer him. Instead, I closed my eyes and activated the presence that only I could sense within my mind. I issued a command through my consciousness. Initiate the Empire-devouring system. Target locked. The Kane family and all its affiliated industries. Begin executing the shadow erosion plan. The system's cold, mechanical voice instantly echoed through my mind. Command confirmed. The shadow erosion plan has been initiated. The system is covertly taking control of the Kane Group's supply chains and cash flows. First step. Secretly sever its partnerships with 3 core construction materials suppliers, creating the illusion of a supply chain breakdown. I opened my eyes and watched the figures representing the Kane family's vast assets flicker wildly across the computer screen. A cruel, cold smile curled across my lips. The reason the Kane family has been able to run roughshod over this city these past few years is their prized real estate developments. The only reason that idiot Victor can act so arrogantly at school is that his father recently secured a massive project supposedly intended to become the finest luxury residential district on the East Coast. The project has drained most of the Kane family's liquid assets. Since they care so much about these few blocks of brick and mortar, I'll start by digging up their foundations. Less than 3 minutes after the system's instruction was issued, Sebastian's private line rang. He answered, listened for a few moments, then hung up. When he looked at me, there was a faint, barely perceptible trace of awe in his eyes. Young master, we've just received word that the 3 largest building materials suppliers to Kane Group suddenly terminated their long-term supply contracts unilaterally, using utterly absurd excuses. Moreover, all 3 suppliers have stated that they would rather pay hefty penalties for breach of contract than supply them even a single screw. I nodded in satisfaction. This was the terrifying thing about the system. It could dismantle an enemy's defenses from within in a way that was completely unreasonable, yet left them with no grounds to object. It was far more deadly than simply throwing money at the problem. This is only the beginning, Sebastian. I sat down in the genuine leather executive chair that symbolized absolute power and folded my hands on the desk. Once the suppliers cut off their deliveries, the construction site for the Kane family's megaproject will be forced to shut down. The losses from each day of the stoppage, combined with the bank interest, will become a bottomless pit. Then Victor's father will undoubtedly scramble to find new funding to fill that hole. Sebastian followed my train of thought precisely. Exactly? My gaze turned utterly cold. When they're running around like mad dogs, borrowing money from anyone they can, you'll offer them a generous gift in the name of an offshore fund. I want them to swallow the poison bait, and then I'll personally push them into the abyss. Lydia threw me away like trash in the pouring rain for that $3 million Rolex and her pathetic sense of security. She thought that by clinging to Victor, her great benefactor, she could live out her days safely at the top of the pyramid. Unfortunately, she had no idea that the so-called skyscraper she had schemed so hard to climb was nothing more than a sandcastle I could knock down at any moment. And I had already strapped explosives all over the building's load-bearing walls. By the way, Sebastian, I heard Victor is throwing some kind of limited edition luxury car party at Starlight Pier tomorrow night? I suddenly remembered and asked casually. Yes, young master. It's a lavish celebration he's holding to show off after securing that luxury estate project. I let out a soft laugh, which sounded particularly cold in the empty study. Excellent. Prepare a decent formal outfit. Tomorrow night, we're going to give him a surprise. It's time to show these frogs at the bottom of the well what a true elite family looks like. Starlight Marina was the city's most exclusive private yacht club. Ordinarily, only old money families worth hundreds of millions were entitled to set foot inside. But tonight, it had been booked out by Victor's nouveau riche father to celebrate his idiot son's so-called business acumen. The entire marina had been decorated like a glowing showroom for nouveau riche excess. More than a dozen limited edition supercars in assorted colors were lined up neatly along both sides of the red carpet, while the champagne towers rose higher than a person. The air reeked of a mixture of expensive cologne and cheap hormones. Dressed in a deep space gray suit with a subtle pattern, handmade by a top Seville Row tailor, I stood inconspicuously at the edge of the crowd, holding a glass of Chateau Lafite. There was no ostentatious solid gold Rolls-Royce, nor Sebastian looming beside me like the Grim Reaper. Tonight, I had brought only one person, Irene Sterling. Yes, it was that top socialite Irene, the woman who controlled half of Wall Street, and whose high heels countless men dreamed of licking. She wore a boldly cut, dark red evening gown and held my arm, looking as sexy as a succubus ready to drain her prey's soul at any moment. Master, your Loki approach is quite distinctive. Irene leaned toward my ear, her breath as fragrant as orchids. The way she drew out the word master was so seductive and lingering that if the Wall Street tycoons heard it, they would probably suffer heart attacks on the spot. The best shows are more entertaining when you take your time watching them. I patted the hand she had looped around my arm. Just then, the crowd erupted into an extraordinarily exaggerated cheer. Victor emerged in a flashy white suit, with Lydia, dressed to the nines, tucked under his arm. He looked like a proud rooster inspecting his territory. Lydia wore an eye-catching ruby necklace around her neck, and her haughty demeanor made it obvious that she already considered herself the future mistress of the Kane family. Victor walked up to a sports car draped in black velvet and, with extreme arrogance, yanked off the cover. A Lamborghini Veneno with an entirely carbon fiber body suddenly appeared before everyone's eyes. Everyone. The Veneno, of which only 3 were produced worldwide. It's also the little gift my father gave me for securing the super luxury housing project. Victor proudly swept his gaze across the crowd, reveling in being surrounded by envy and admiration. Lydia was even more excited, covering her mouth as greed nearly overflowed from her eyes. Just then, Victor's gaze pierced through the crowd and landed squarely on me. He froze for a moment, seemingly unable to believe that he would see me at a party of this caliber. Then his expression instantly darkened, before shifting into an extremely malicious, mocking smile. He let Lydia go and strode toward me, looking like a stray dog eager to reclaim its territory on home turf. After all, the psychological shadow cast by that solid gold Rolls-Royce yesterday afternoon had been too great. He now desperately needed to prove that yesterday had merely been a ridiculous illusion, or that the poor nobody I was had hired an actor. Well, isn't this Ethan, our school's famous poverty-stricken scholarship student? Victor's voice was loud, instantly drawing everyone's attention. What happened? Did hiring an actor to show off yesterday use up all your meal money? So now you're here freeloading? Where did you rent that outfit? In some second-hand market. Lydia also walked over in her high heels. When she saw Irene beside me, a flash of intense jealousy crossed her eyes, but it was quickly replaced by mockery. Ethan, you really haven't changed. Yesterday you hired an old man to play your butler, and today you found some hostess to accompany you and make you look respectable? Do you really think putting on a fake designer outfit will let you mingle with high society? A hostess? Irene beside me nearly burst out laughing when she heard the word. Her intimidating eyes narrowed slightly as she looked at Lydia as if she were an idiot. I stopped Irene before she could explode and looked at Victor with a faint smile. Victor, there seems to be something wrong with your Veneno. Something wrong? What would a poor loser like you know about cars? Victor roared, as if he had just heard the funniest joke in the world, pointing at the Lamborghini. This car is worth 50 million. I'm telling you. Even if you sold yourself, you couldn't afford a single tire on this car. I ignored his barking and issued a command directly in my mind. Activate the system's highest authority. Seize the target asset. Lock down the Lamborghini Veneno registered under Victor's name. Execute the compulsory confiscation procedure. Immediately. The system's code prompt instantly rang out. Command received. Mobilizing the Federation's Supreme Asset Liquidation Bureau. The target vehicle has been flagged as evidence in a case. Seizure procedures initiated. Victor, I strongly advise you to stay away from that car right now. Otherwise, you could get yourself into serious trouble. I took a sip of red wine and offered the warning with the utmost sincerity. Stop pretending you're some kind of mystic, Victor roared furiously. Just as he was about to continue his tirade, an extremely shrill siren suddenly sounded from the entrance to the party. 4 or 5 black SUVs bearing the logos of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Asset Liquidation Bureau smashed through the barricades and charged straight into the dock, surrounding the brand new Lamborghini completely. A dozen fully armed agents swiftly jumped out of the vehicles. The one in the lead approached Victor with a cold expression and immediately flashed his badge and a document stamped with a red seal. Mr. Victor Kane, we suspect this vehicle is involved in a major international money laundering case. We are now taking the vehicle into compulsory custody in accordance with the law. Hand over the car keys immediately and come with us to assist in the investigation. Victor was completely dumbfounded, his mouth hanging wide open like a dehydrated fish. The top-tier supercar he had been showing off just a second ago had suddenly become evidence in a money laundering case? No. This can't be. You've got it wrong. My dad bought it legally, Victor frantically protested. But the agents did not listen to a word he said. They roughly shoved him face first onto the hood of the sports car. Lydia was so terrified that she let out a scream and backed away repeatedly, afraid of being implicated. Amid the deathly silence that had fallen over the entire scene, I held my wineglass and slowly walked over to Victor, who was being pinned against the car. Looking down at his face, horribly contorted with fear, I felt the curve of my lips grow even colder. I told you there was something wrong with this car. What's the matter? Is your vaunted capitalist power not even enough to protect a beat-up car? I bent down and said, enunciating each word in a voice only the two of us could hear. Victor, this is just an appetizer. Enjoy the hellish journey ahead of you. The farce of the limited edition sports car being forcibly impounded was, at most, a hard slap in Victor's face. Now, what I was going to do was sever the carotid artery of the Kane family directly. in the panoramic command center on the top floor of the estate. Irene held a freshly brewed espresso and lounged against the armrest of my leather chair. Across the massive curved screen before me, Kane Group's internal financial data was flashing in real time. That glaring crimson was more intoxicating than even the finest burgundy. Thanks to the shadow erosion plan launched by the system yesterday, the Kane family's vaunted mega mansion project had been brought to a complete standstill for 48 hours. Construction materials had been cut off. Banks were demanding repayment, and the idle cranes and excavators were devouring what little cash flow they had left. Victor's arrogant father, the elder Kane, was now like a headless fly trapped in a burning maze, desperately in need of a massive infusion of outside capital to stay alive. Young master, the bait has been cast. Sebastian's steady voice came through the encrypted micro-earpiece in my ear, through the system's all-pervasive surveillance network. I watched coldly as events unfolded in the top-floor conference room of Kane Group. The elder Kane and Victor, whose face was still bruised, sat tensely at the conference table. Seated opposite them was a delegation representing an offshore fund called Atlas Capital, controlled by Sebastian. On the table lay a development plan for a super-deep-water port on the East Coast, titled Leviathan. Mr. Kane, this is a closed-door invitation. The agent spoke in a polished Wall Street elite accent as he slid over a gold-embossed document. We've already secured the federal government's internal approval. But this pie is simply too large. We need a local heavyweight with enough influence on the East Coast to handle the ground infrastructure. The initial investment required is a full $10 billion. If you can't take it on, the Sterling family would be more than happy to step in. At the mention of the Sterling family, Eileen beside me let out a soft laugh. It was the perfect psychological trigger, because the Kane family had always dreamed of surpassing the Sterling family in status. On the surveillance footage, Victor leapt up like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. He slammed his hand onto the table and glared at his father. Dad, we have to secure this project. We won't be able to cover the shortfall from that luxury residence development much longer. If we mortgage every commercial plaza and residential property we own to the banks, we can just about raise the $10 billion. The moment this port project gets underway, we'll be able to cash out immediately. Then we'll be the true kings of the entire East Coast. We absolutely cannot let anyone else take it. As he said this, a mad gambler's fervor gleamed in Victor's eyes. He was desperate to prove himself, especially after being publicly humiliated the night before. Old Kane was still hesitating, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Mortgage the family's entire fortune? If it doesn't succeed, we won't even have scraps of bone left. I leaned back in my chair and issued a cold command to the system in my mind. Release the forged top-secret geological survey report and the federal pre-approval documents, and deliver them directly to the Kane Group's risk assessment department. Turn the data into a flawless, wildly profitable trap. The system's emotionless mechanical voice immediately replied. Command confirmed. Data package injected. Perfect illusion generated. In less than 2 minutes, the Kane Group's chief risk officer excitedly burst through the conference room door, waving a tablet in his hand. Boss, the data is almost too good to be true. The deep-water draft line and soil-bearing capacity tests are all top-tier. And an internal memo from the Federal Planning Bureau shows that this area is about to be designated a tax-free trade zone. If we don't sign today, those bloodsuckers on Wall Street will devour this piece of land tomorrow. Greed is, and always will be, the deadliest poison in this world. I watched old Kane's eyes gradually turn blood red on the screen. He snatched up the diamond-encrusted Mont Blanc fountain pen and, trembling, signed his name on the contract. The moment the pen touched the paper, the Kane family's real estate empire, accumulated over decades, was officially mortgaged to the bank. The entire $10 billion in liquid funds was transferred directly into a joint account fully controlled by the system. What a bunch of hopeless idiots. Irene leaned over, her red lips lightly brushing against my neck. What they just signed was their own death warrant. Wasn't it? You can't even imagine how deep this water is. I chuckled softly as I brought up the true geological map of that so-called superport on the screen. The Kane family would never know that the port's site, whose real data had been perfectly concealed by the system, was actually located directly atop an extremely unstable undersea fault. Even more devastatingly, buried beneath those waters was a massive amount of highly toxic, severely polluting chemical waste left over from the 1970s. The moment their supposedly world-class engineering team drove the first shovel into the ground, the toxic pollutants would leak out. The Federal Environmental Protection Agency would immediately sound its highest-level red alert, permanently seal off the area, and hit them with a staggering fine so enormous that it would take them generations to repay. Their $10 billion had already fallen irretrievably into an impenetrable black hole. I lifted the espresso to my lips and downed it in one gulp. The trap's gate was now firmly locked. Victor and his old man thought they had bought a golden ticket to the pantheon of billionaires. But in reality, they had bankrupted themselves to purchase a one-way ticket straight to the lowest depths of hell. Now, all I had to do was sit comfortably on my throne, watch the countdown run out, and savor the moment the golden tower known as Kane crumbled into dust in the blink of an eye. Less than 48 hours after the Kane family's $10 billion funds were transferred into the trap account, the first domino fell. That morning, the sky was as gloomy as a slab of rusted lead. I was sitting in the Manor's glass conservatory, enjoying an English breakfast prepared by Sebastian himself, while Irene listlessly trimmed a priceless black orchid nearby. Suddenly, a sharp system alert rang out in the quiet greenhouse. High-level warning. The target Abyssal Behemoth Port project has triggered the destruction mechanism. Phase 1 drilling operations by the engineering team have caused a massive leak of highly toxic chemical waste on the seafloor. The Federal Environmental Protection Agency has issued its highest-level red lockdown order. Major media outlets have simultaneously obtained the inside information. The system's cold, mechanical voice announced the arrival of the Kane family's doom. I elegantly cut off a small piece of tender truffle omelette and put it into my mouth, not even looking up at the screen, because the next second, Irene excitedly thrust the tablet right in front of me. Master, look! The whole of Wall Street is freaking out. A bloodthirsty gleam flashed in her beautiful eyes. On the screen, live footage from CNN and Fox News was switching frantically. 1 second, it showed the imposing skyscraper belonging to the Kane Group. The next, it had cut to a port construction site sealed off by glaring yellow warning tape. Hazmat teams in heavy protective suits were carrying out emergency operations at the scene, making it look like something straight out of a biological disaster. This is Federal News Network. Several hours ago, a catastrophic accident occurred at the Superport project hailed as the East Coast's project of the century. A leak of highly toxic substances triggered by the construction is threatening the ecological security of the entire bay. The Federal Environmental Protection Agency has issued the Kane Group a staggering $8 billion fine and ordered it to cover all subsequent cleanup costs. An $8 billion fine. Those 4 words were like a red-hot dagger, stabbing straight through the heart of the Kane family. But the real show was only just beginning. I wiped the corner of my mouth with a tissue, leaned back in my chair, and issued the system its final death sentence. Initiate the comprehensive net closing procedure. Immediately release all evidence of the Kane Group concealing project risks and bribing assessment agencies. At the same time, notify all lending banks that the Kane Group is effectively bankrupt and demand the immediate enforcement of their mortgage rights. Instruction confirmed. The top-secret files have been distributed to all major media outlets and the federal prosecutor's office. The liquidation procedure for the mortgaged assets has begun. Just 10 minutes later, another, far more violent storm swept across the entire city. Scandals came pouring in like floodwaters bursting through a breached dam, engulfing every social media platform and making headlines everywhere. The irrefutable evidence that the Kane Group had forged geological reports, bribed federal officials, and even used mob tactics to threaten its competitors in order to secure the project was ruthlessly exposed to the public. Every bill and every recording hit Victor and his old man squarely in their smug, self-satisfied faces like a sledgehammer. I watched the Kane Group stock chart plunge in a straight line across the screen, the cold smirk at the corners of my mouth growing deeper. Less than 10 minutes after the market opened, the one-star stock hit its daily limit down, wiping out 90% of its market value in an instant. To make matters worse, the major banks on Wall Street pounced like sharks smelling blood. The banks have already made their move. Young master. Sebastian appeared silently behind me, holding a freshly printed court seizure order. The commercial plazas and residential properties they had mortgaged and put everything into, even the top-tier mansion worth $30 million that they themselves lived in, were all slapped with court seals in a swift and decisive move at this very moment. The whole process happened so quickly that it was impossible to breathe. Just yesterday, Victor was still the kind of top-tier bully who could swagger through the school and use money to crush anyone at the slightest disagreement. But today, he had become a desperate stray dog burdened with tens of billions in debt, and liable to be locked away in a federal prison for the rest of his life at any moment. I can even imagine the despair and madness on his face right now. Suddenly, the private phone I had left on the desk began to vibrate. An unfamiliar number flashed on the screen, but I didn't need to guess who it was. At a time like this, who else but that self-important woman would think to call this secret number of mine? I pressed the answer button and casually turned on the speakerphone. Ethan, it's me. Lydia. Lydia's voice trembled on the other end of the line like a fallen leaf shivering in a raging wind. All her former arrogance was gone, replaced by nothing but nauseating humility and fear. Ethan, I was wrong. I really was. I had no idea you were actually. Please, for the sake of the relationship we shared over the past 6 months, save me. Victor's gone mad. His father was taken away by the FBI, and those loan shark gangsters are searching for him everywhere. I've been dragged into this too. They said they're going to seize me to pay off his debt. The relationship we shared in the past? I couldn't help letting out a soft laugh, my voice so cold it held not a trace of warmth. Lydia, have you forgotten how you threw coffee in my face for that $3 million Rolex? Since you love the Kane family's money so much, you should enjoy the feeling of going to hell with them. No, Ethan, I know you must have a way. I'll do anything if you'll save me. I'm willing to be your dog for the rest of my life. Lydia screamed hysterically from the other end of the phone. and I could even hear her sobbing uncontrollably. I stared coldly at the gloomy sky outside the window and said flatly, "Unfortunately, my estate doesn't accept trash." With that, I hung up the phone and permanently blocked the number. The towering edifice of wealth that the Kane family had spent decades building, piled high with the blood, sweat, and lives of countless people, finally came crashing down at that very moment, and I stood atop the highest point of the ruins, savoring the spectacle of its magnificent destruction. The torrential rain tonight fell even more violently than the storm a few days ago, as if the city were eager to wash away the last lingering trace of the Kane family. I sat in the mansion's first-floor drawing room, luxurious enough to rival a museum, idly playing with a solid gold lighter in my hand. The firelight from the fireplace cast my face in shifting light and shadow. Irene, wearing a black silk robe, curled languidly at my feet like an extremely dangerous black panther utterly submissive to me. "Young master, they're here." Sebastian pushed open the heavy oak door and entered, bringing with him the scent of rain. "They're at the mansion's main gate. Security says they look like two drowned rats on the verge of sinking." I raised an eyebrow and tossed the lighter onto the table with a crisp click. "Let them crawl in." 5 minutes later, the door to the reception room opened again. Two creatures barely recognizable as human beings were dragged inside by two burly security guards, like dead dogs, and then viciously thrown onto the expensive Persian rug. It was Victor and Lydia. If you hadn't seen it with your own eyes, it would be hard to believe that these were the same two arrogant, overbearing people who had swaggered around just a few days ago. Victor's 60,000 yuan bespoke suit was in tatters, covered in mud and unidentified filth. His face was mottled with bruises, clearly showing that the gangsters collecting the dead had given him a brutal beating. His entire body trembled violently and uncontrollably, his eyes unfocused, like a stray dog whose spine had been broken. Lydia's condition was even more horrific. The exquisite makeup she had once been so proud of had long since been completely washed away by the rain, and the ruby necklace she had once flaunted was nowhere to be seen. She was barefoot, the soles of her feet smeared with blood and grime, while her hair clung to her face like dried grass. "Ethan, no, Mr. Vale, please." The moment Victor saw me, he clung to me like I was his last lifeline. Desperate, he dropped to his knees with a thud and even crawled forward, trying to grab my trouser leg. The security guard immediately stepped forward and kicked him hard in the chest, sending him back to the edge of the carpet. Victor, leaning back on the sofa. I looked down at him from above, my tone as calm as if we were discussing the weather. "What happened to that 3 million yuan Richard Mill of yours? And that 50 million yuan poison? Why don't you use the capital power you're so proud of to crush those debt collectors?" Victor gasped for breath like a dying fish, tears and snot mingling with the rainwater streaming down his face. He frantically slammed his head against the floor, producing dull, thudding sounds. "I was wrong. I'm a blind, worthless animal. I failed to recognize a great man when I saw one. Please, Mr. Will, let me go. My father has already been arrested. The bank has taken all our money, and those loan sharks even stripped me of my clothes. They said that if I don't pay back the money, they'll dismember me tomorrow and throw me into the sea to feed the fish." As he wailed, he repeatedly slapped himself hard across the face. Each slap was delivered with all his strength, the sharp cracks echoing especially harshly through the spacious reception room. The once arrogant bully who had treated people like garbage and trampled them beneath his feet was now groveling like a wretched dog wagging its tail for mercy, abandoning all dignity just to stay alive. I said nothing, merely turning to look at Lydia, who had remained sprawled on the floor the entire time, motionless as a corpse. Noticing my gaze, Lydia finally raised her head. On the face I had once considered pure and adorable, there was now nothing but endless remorse and fear. She crawled toward me trembling, her humble posture utterly different from the haughty way she had looked when she threw coffee in my face in the rain. "Ethan." The moment she began to speak, she saw Irene nestled at my feet. In that instant, the last glimmer in her eyes completely went out. In front of Wall Street's most prominent socialite, she was inferior even to the lowest class hooker. "Ethan, I really know I was wrong. I shouldn't have betrayed you or looked down on you for being poor. Please, give me another chance. Will you? I'm willing to work like a beast of burden for you, even as a servant, as long as you don't make me face those gangsters, as long as you don't throw me out." Lydia wept hysterically, even trying to kiss the tip of my shoe. Irene wrinkled her nose in disgust and pressed her high heel down on the back of Lydia's hand, not hard, but not gently either. Lydia let out a scream, yet didn't even dare struggle. "Master, these two pieces of trash are really an eyesore. Wouldn't it be better to make them disappear from this world?" Irene suggested in that tinglingly seductive voice. I let out a cold laugh, rose to my feet, and walked toward them step by step. Disappear? That would be letting them off too easily. I bent down and stared at Victor and Lydia with an utterly cruel gaze. "Don't you think money and status are more important than loyalty? Then I'll make you spend the rest of your lives learning what it truly means to be at the bottom." I straightened up and issued Sebastian his final command. "Throw them out of the city. Have the people in the underworld take good care of them. I want them to live in fear and hunger every day. picking through garbage for the rest of their lives. If they dare set foot in the city, break their legs. Yes, young master. The security guards dragged the two howling, struggling figures out of the reception room as if they were hauling away 2 bags of stinking garbage. The doors slammed shut, completely cutting off their nauseating pleas. The vicious dogs had finally met the fate they deserved. It was time to bring this game to an end. The torrential rain continued for 3 days and 3 nights, finally ceasing completely at dawn on the 4th day. The rising sun tore through the thick leaden-gray clouds, and golden sunlight, sharp as a sword, poured down over the city that had just endured a financial earthquake. I stood in the top-floor panoramic office of the WoW Consortium's headquarters, a colossal black-tempered glass tower rising 120 stories into the clouds. Beneath my feet lay Wall Street, bustling like a colony of ants, the beating heart of the entire East Coast. And now, that heart beat for me alone. Young master. Sebastian approached silently from behind me, carrying a jet-black velvet tray. Resting on it was a weighty document that had just been signed. The liquidation procedures have all been completed. As of today, the name Kane has been completely erased from this city's business landscape and historical registry. I did not turn around. Gazing down at the steel jungle beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, I asked calmly, what became of them in the end? Old Kane, convicted of multiple charges, was sentenced to 460 years in prison by the Federal Supreme Court. He's being held in the maximum security prison at the very bottom, and he'll never see another ray of sunlight for the rest of his life. Sebastian's voice was perfectly steady, without the slightest ripple. As for Victor and the woman named Lydia, following your instructions, they were dumped in one of the most chaotic illegal mining zones in South America. Victor now has to fight wild dogs every day for half a piece of moldy bread. And Lydia, she's gone insane. Every day, she tells everyone she meets that she's the mistress of a $100 billion empire, making herself the biggest joke in the entire mining zone. I smiled with satisfaction. This was the price of angering me. I would not only strip them of their wealth, but also crush their spirits, forcing them to spend the rest of their lives in endless pain and humiliation. Just then, deep within my mind, I heard the system's long-absent mechanical voice, now carrying a strange ripple. Ding! The Empire-devouring system's final assessment. Target: the Kane family has achieved 100% complete consumption. Host asset integration complete. Control of the East Coast economic lifelines has been fully assumed. Identity seal completely lifted. Congratulations, host Ethan Vale, on achieving the title Wall Street Tyrant. The new king has been crowned. The system will now enter silent protection mode. May you reign supreme forever. As the system voice faded away, I felt an unprecedented sense of control coursing through every limb of my body. The pulsating stock tickers, the financial lifelines governing the fate of tens of millions, the enormous business empire, all were as easy to command as my own limbs, becoming a part of my body. The crisp sound of high heels striking the expensive marble floor came from behind me. Irene Sterling, the stunning socialite who had captivated the hearts and minds of countless tycoons, approached me with a seductive sway, wearing an extraordinarily striking black swan evening gown with a plunging v-neck. Around her neck hung the Eye of the Deep Sea, a sapphire necklace once belonging to European royalty and worth $200 million, the little gift I had casually bestowed upon her last night. She came to my side and waved her hand, signaling Sebastian to leave. The legendary Butler gave a slight bow and withdrew from this domain belonging solely to the king. Like a shadow, Irene carried 2 crystal goblets filled to the brim with the finest Romani Conti and handed one to me. Then, instead of nestling into my arms like those vulgar women, she elegantly took half a step back, slightly lifted her skirt, and gave me a flawless European royal curtsy. To the new master of this city, and to my supreme king. Irene raised her head, her mesmerizing eyes burning with undisguised fervor and absolute submission. I looked at her, tipped my head back, and drained the blood-red wine in one gulp, casually tossing the goblet onto the thick carpet. I wrapped one arm around Irene's slender waist and pressed her firmly against the cold floor-to-ceiling window. Outside the window lay an abyss. Inside, absolute power. Eileen showed no trace of fear. Instead, she let out a seductive moan. She extended her jade-like arms, clad in black lace gloves, and wrapped them tightly around my neck. Rising onto her toes, she took the initiative and feverishly kissed me with lips painted a deadly red. It was a kiss laced with the scent of blood, red wine, and boundless lust for power. In that deep kiss, she offered me the complete submission of Wall Street's highest circles. After a long while, I released her. Eileen leaned breathlessly against my chest, a captivating blush coloring her fair cheeks. She extended her slender fingers and gently wiped away the trace of lipstick left at the corner of my lips. What do you plan to do next, my tyrant? She gazed up at me, her voice filled with anticipation. I turned around, spread my arms, and faced the megacity beneath me, glittering in the sunlight. Every skyscraper, every cross-sea bridge, every ounce of wealth and glory was bowing its head to me at this very moment. Do what I must. I gazed at my own cold, imposing reflection in the glass, and murmured under my breath, 7 days ago, I was still the pauper who had coffee thrown all over him by a materialistic woman in a torrential downpour, and was wantonly trampled by a rich second-generation heir. Today, I am Ethan Vale, the sole law of this capital of power, the imperial master who controls everything. In this hunting ground where capital reigns supreme, I personally smashed the old throne to pieces. The new order will be written by me. The real show has only just begun. The end.